Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the front row. My name is Jamie Williamson. I'm the Executive Vice President here at Scripps Research. And today we're really pleased to have Lakethia Àjàyí with us to talk about maternal health. But before she starts, I thought I'd say a few things about Scripps research. So we have many different kinds of research going on here. We have fundamental basic research. We do drug discovery, and importantly for today, we do translational research, where we take studies where we study things and apply what we learn to actually benefit directly human health. And the major seat of that is the Scripps Research Translational Institute. And that was founded by Eric Topol. Many of you may be familiar with him. He's quite a tweeter of late. And there's, we've merged in with Scripps, that we've had a close relationship with the Translational Institute for quite a few years. But Eric brought in digital technologies and more recently artificial intelligence to tell us how disease varies from person to person, and really working toward personalized medicine. A couple of examples would be using wearable sensors. So these are just personal devices like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, and it monitors a number of physiological parameters, and you can correlate that with a number of things. And one thing they studied was how your body responds to getting vaccinated for COVID-19. In addition, they figured out how you could predict the onset of flu just from data collected from your Fitbit. Here's a couple of other examples. So a smartphone app that calculates genetic risk for heart attack. And this is a way to motivate people to modify their behaviors or seek medications. And here's another study where they looked at people who wore patches to detect arterial fibrillation, and that lowered the rate of stroke and heart attack. So these simple devices that are prevalent in our society can be used to great medical advantage. And they put together a digital trial center, and this just broadly uses digital health technologies to reach out to people anywhere in the country, and it can serve underrepresented communities as well. And one of the main precepts of this is that you share the data with your participants so they can understand what they're doing. So there are, I guess, 6 programs in the Digital Trial Center, and today we're going to hear from Lakethia, who is focusing on maternal health. So she's harnessing the power of personal devices for unmet medical needs for pregnant mothers, and in particular, this applies to underserved communities. One other thing I want to say about Lakethia is that she was one of our clinical scholars. So Eric Topol is the principal investigator on a Clinical Translational Scientist Award, which is set up for training clinical scholars. And we have a KL2 program, and Lakethia graduated from that maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and has since embedded herself in SRTI to work on the PowerMom application. So I will stop there and let Lakethia take it over.
I'm actually very excited to be here to talk about this research platform and how we're really partnering with the participant to make a true difference in maternal research, and the importance of partnering with our participants to bring pregnancy research at the palm of our hands, because if we want to make a difference in the maternal health landscape, it can only happen by working together with our participants and with all those who are interested in making a difference in this field. Before I get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about who I am and how I got started here. And my journey into the maternal health landscape actually started with my mom, who I consider my original power mom, who immigrated to Ithaca, New York, with 2 suitcases and 3 very small children, 3 very small daughters from Nigeria. She came here as a political refugee, And she tells me that it was during that transition period that I told her that I wanted to be a doctor for children so that kids everywhere could feel safe going to the doctor. Apparently, during that immigration process, my sisters and I were not treated very well, and I did not enjoy that process. And it had a lasting impact, and it stuck with me. So as we left Ithaca, New York, and moved to Lawrence, Kansas, and I'll pause here and say that the culture shock from going from Nigeria to Ithaca, New York was not as great as moving from New York to Lawrence, Kansas, but I am truly a Jayhawk for life. Love KU. I actually spent most of my late childhood and early adulthood at KU. That's where I did my undergrad, medical school, and residency. And so I did stick with being a pediatrician. And during that time as a pediatrician, seeing the health disparities that persisted, particularly around, kids that were living into adulthood that had, really previously devastating childhood diseases, in particular sickle cell disease, cystic fibrosis, survivors of pediatric cancers. I wanted to do something more. I wanted to make it better. These are truly the most vulnerable of our population, and I wanted to do something more. So I was thinking of fellowships. So I want to do, infectious disease, pain fellowship, hematology, and of all things, I actually ended up in San Diego in a hospice and palliative medicine fellowship because it was really about that quality of life and symptom management that drove me here. So once I arrived here in San Diego, the thoughts of going back to Kansas left my mind, even though, again, Jayhawk for life. But once you arrive in San Diego, it's hard to go back to the Midwest. So after my fellowship, I was hired by Rady Children's as a community pediatrician. So as a hospitalist doing eventually newborn nursery as a hospitalist. I was hired by Scripps Health as an adult palliative care physician, really honing my skills in symptom management, but I was still wanting to do more at the bedside. And one of my colleagues said, I really think that you should do a research fellowship. And as Jamie said, that's how I applied. It was a KL scholar, or KL2 clinical scholar with Eric Tobel's group, and coming to SRTI and being in this environment with Steve Steinhobel and digital research, it opened my eyes. It was like that missing piece was there. How do I harness digital health technologies to really translate that to what our patients need at the bedside, this truly vulnerable population at these intersections of their lives? How do we harness what should be ubiquitous, that everybody has access to really quickly impact our patients' lives? And being in this environment at SRTI with so many brilliant people with different scientific backgrounds, hearing these conversations, being part of these conversations really changed my career trajectory as I worked on healthcare disparities in pain and maternal fetal health with my work in newborn nursery. I started working with Jennifer Radin, who's the original principal investigator for the Healthy Pregnancy Study and Power Mom. She and I and our colleague, Andrew Sue's wife, were pregnant around the same time, and she was talking about Power Mom and the fact that, we're all different, but we're all getting the same recommendations for our pregnancies and our bodies. And she had, wouldn't it be great if we could have individualized precision clinical recommendations based on our own data? And that's how that Healthy Pregnancy Study was born. Wouldn't it be great to get that individual recommendations for this, again, vulnerable part of our life, over this journey? And as she created this Power Mom study that I got to be a part of, and the dream of, as we amass more data, more participants on this platform, to really create this digital twin, because for anybody who's pregnant, who's ever been pregnant, despite having people around you, pregnancy can really be isolating. So having someone who may be similar to you, have similar demographics, similar pinpoints as you, to know kind of what that pregnancy journey looked like for them. Can this be a point of interaction with your clinician, with your physician, to learn more about your pregnancy? And perhaps we can make a dent in the maternal fetal health landscape. And so we had this longitudinal pregnancy study to gather more information. What gaps are we missing in this pregnancy journey, and how can we impact maternal research in this way? And as Jennifer went on to do amazing things at SRTI with COVID and flu, and I became the PI for Power Mom, I really wanted to elevate the participant voice, to really partner with them as we tackle the maternal fetal health crisis that we have in the United States and really shine a light on the healthcare disparities. You know, one of our co-founders of the DTC, Katie Beckham-Most, with her research experience, also talked about bringing the many people who are passionate about addressing the healthcare disparities in this landscape together. And perhaps PowerMom can really be that data repository for all those who want to make a difference, right? Because I think we're recognizing more and more that the United States is at a crossroads, is at a consistent crisis in maternal fetal healthcare, and bringing all these people together. And perhaps PowerMom can be that place to hold that data so we can work together and make that difference. So we come together with this shared goal to work with our participants, to work with our partners, to truly build this the largest, most diverse pregnancy-related research community. And that community is a key piece so that we can inform and support pregnant people across the country to improve maternal and fetal health outcomes. Now, I brought my clinical and my research expertise as the PowerMom PI when Jennifer transitioned this platform to me. And I also wanted to partner with that participant voice to raise that voice. Because when we talk about the crisis that we face, and I'll go through some of those stats, but all scientists, all researchers, when we do this work, we're health scientists, we do this for the patient, right? When we talk about translational science, we want to impact the care of our participants. So before I move forward, I want to take a step back and actually lift up the voice of one of the participants that we want to impact with this data. And I want to introduce you all to Lakethia and share a little bit of her story. Now, I met Lakethia working with one of our PowerMom consortium partners, and I'll speak about that a little bit later, Jessica Wade from March of Dimes. She introduced Lakethia to me because I was looking for moms who'd had troubling experiences within the NICU. And as she was telling me about one of her stories in the NICU about her daughter, she was telling me about her pregnancy history and how having a platform kind of very much like PowerMom that she could contribute her research data, her data to, so that maybe scientists could actually help her not have the poor outcomes that she had, would have impacted her healthcare, her baby's healthcare, and made a difference. So before I go in and talk about the data about the healthcare crisis that we face in the United States, I actually want to put Lakethia's story, who gave me permission to share her story, this part of her story, for this front row lecture series, to put a face and a voice to the data that we're collecting and the reason why we do this work.
My name is Lakethia Jones. I am 39 years old and I am a mom of two. The little girl that we're going to be talking about is my little baby, Callie. I had her at 26 weeks, and I had her early because I had intrauterine restrictive growth. I had preeclampsia, eclampsia, and I have an incompetent cervix. So with that being said, I went to have surgery with Miss Callie at 13 weeks. So they can make sure that she didn't come out early. And then at that point, prior to that, I was seeing my OBGYN, and I also was seeing a high-risk OBGYN because my case was just so, I can't say different, but it was very, very difficult because I had had 3 miscarriages in the past, or spontaneous abortions in the past because of my situation and how my OBGYNs at the time, they wasn't listening to me about me and how I know my body and how, how fragile my body is when I am pregnant. And so
a little bit more about that, just really quickly. What do you mean they weren't listening to you, that you weren't being heard or seen?
So when I first got pregnant when I was 16 years old, and that's when at that time I was at home in Mississippi. And that's when we found out, when my mom found out that I had a weakened cervix. So at that time I had delivered my son at 22 weeks. And I'm saying I delivered him because I can't really say that I delivered him because in Mississippi, of course, is predominantly white at the time. And they had given me some medicine. I guess my mom approved of it and it had knocked me out. And when I came back to, the doctors was in between my legs saying that my baby had passed away.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So at that time, my mom, they had left, and nevertheless, and I was just there by myself. And that, like I said, my baby had died, and they told me at that point that I would never be able to have kids ever in life. So that is what I took with me, forever. So when I got pregnant again, I was in the military. I am a military vet. I was explaining to my OBGYN how I had delivered my son, and they said that I had an incompetent cervix because they didn't have my medical records. They didn't listen to what I said. And so I ended up delivering my daughter, and I was put on bed rest at 13 weeks because I started bleeding. And I ended up delivering my daughter at 20 weeks because they didn't listen when I said that I had an incompetent cervix. So once my body got to that point, I started to deliver. So my daughter, I named her Lanaya. She ended up passing away as well.
Oh my God.
And so I got pregnant again, and I have my 13-year-old, soon to be 14-year-old, Miss Kaylee, and I finally got an OBGYN that actually listened to me with Kaylee. That was back in 2007 when I got pregnant with her. So I delivered, 2008, I'm sorry, and I delivered her October of 2008. But that OBGYN, he actually listened to me. I started bleeding with Kaylee at 9 weeks. So I went on bed rest from 9 weeks up into 35 weeks when they took the cerclage out. And like I said, I was high risk with her as well. And that's when they found out that I had preeclampsia, I had placenta previa, and of course I had my incompetent cervix. I ended up getting my cerclage at 13 weeks with Miss Kaylee, and I was high risk. I was still bleeding up until that point, and none of my family really knew that I was pregnant with her. I just didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to get anyone hopes up high, that, I'm keep getting pregnant, but, my doctors are not listening to me. And I didn't want my family to go through that. So I decided to really go through it by myself up until the 13-week point.
So I appreciate you indulging me and listening to Lakethia's story, because again, Lakethia highlights why we do this work. Having ready access to data that can translate to the bedside, that can impact how we as physicians, how we as a medical system can readily treat our patients, can act on that data, can make a difference in the health outcomes that we're trying to improve. So when we collect data, when we conduct science, there's a reason that we do it, and there's an impact that we're hoping to see. And it shouldn't have to wait until we have published peer-reviewed journals. So we can act on it, review it, analyze it, and get it to really to translate it to the bedside as soon as possible. We can make that impact that we're trying to see. So as I go through these stats that are so common knowledge now because it's all over the news, remember that there's a face and there's a name behind these stats and what we're trying to impact. So when we look really across all demographics since 2018, and these are the most recent data that I was able to find from the CDC, that really maternal mortality has really increased really pretty steadily since consistently, but this is from 2018 to 2020. What you're seeing here has increased in total, and you see that the rates are increased for Black pregnant people compared to white pregnant people across, and this is even more definitely evident for those who are older than 40. Again, increase among ages, but we see such a huge disparity once they're over the age of 40. across demographics. Apparently there was a small period here in 2019 at the beginning of the COVID pandemic where we saw a slight reprieve for those who are over the age of 40, as opposed to our other counterparts where there was a small decrease, but then it jumped back up in 2020 during the height of the pandemic. I'd be curious to see what the 2021 numbers look like for those who are over the age of 40. And we see these disparities continue again with our Alaska Native participants or patients included in this demographic with the age numbers. But we also see that it's pretty consistent amongst education levels as well. We don't even have information for college or graduate education for American Indian Alaska Native, which is data that we can easily capture with the Paramount platform when we partner with a participant and allow them to contribute to data using technology that they have ready access to by including them in the design and engaging them in this very important work. Because again, the more information that we have, the better we can do by our participants, by our patients. I put this busy slide up here so we can quickly capture the cause of pregnancy-related death. And really the upshot of this busy slide is that most of the causes of pregnancy-related death are preventable. If we can bring these moms to engage with the healthcare system sooner, we can actually prevent a lot of these causes. I was doing a home visit for one of my pediatric palliative care patients on Tuesday of this week. That was just yesterday. And one of the moms, the mom of the patient I was seeing, was talking to me as she was processing kind of decisions that she had made for her baby. She was telling me that her sister in the past year died from hemorrhage unexpectedly. She's 25 years old, 35 weeks gestation, died suddenly from hemorrhage. Again, is this something that could have been picked up? Probably. Do we have the technology? Do we have the availability to screen and pick things up? We do. We just have to do a better job of it and do it sooner. And we can harness the power of technology to do it better. We just have to know how and when to do it. And that's what Paramount can help us learn. The truth is that if we don't engage in this population in research, we can't learn how to do it better. This table shows that there's just been a breadth of missing voices in research. This first table that I'll show here shows that in general, women don't participate in clinical trials in general. Over here, you can see the yellow dots shows the prevalence, as in how frequently women represent having these diseases, HIV, coronary artery disease, hyperlipidemia, heart failure, etc. How frequently we represent these diseases versus how much we're included in the clinical trials in these diseases, right? So if we're not included in the clinical trials, how can we have interventions that can help us, that can treat better? This data here shows the exclusion of women of childbearing age all the way down to 2022 with the exclusion of pregnant people in the COVID-19 pregnancy trials. I remember being very pregnant in my third trimester when the COVID-19 vaccines came out, and in a moment of desperation and maybe a little bit of insanity, publicizing my story and just going on Twitter and just kind of talking about my journey getting the COVID-19 vaccine to build trust amongst people, and talking about my experience with the COVID-19 to engage people in conversation, especially people of color who are more likely to not engage in clinical trials, who are not going to be wanting to get the COVID-19, to show that it's safe, to build that trust and engage in that conversation. And I think that's how we engage our participants in clinical research trials, to have that trust and have that bidirectional conversation. And that's one of the avenues that we pursue with the Paramount Research Platform. So how do we know that this will work? How do we know that if we put the power in the hands of our participants, that they can engage? Well, first, we know that we're using a technology that's easily accessible. According to the Pew Research, 90%, is probably growing since I looked at this data, 90% of women own a smartphone, 83% of Black Americans own a smartphone, 76% of Americans who make $30,000 or less own a smartphone, right? As we improve the broadband infrastructure across the United States, people will have more access to technology and be able to support that technology to give us this information. we are able to give them devices, right, to capture the data that we need. The technology is rapidly evolving, is rapidly growing to give us so much more information that we can use to learn, to predict, to anticipate who's going to be more likely to get preeclampsia, who's more at risk for postpartum depression, gestational diabetes, that we can act on. And we know from participants such as Lakethia that pregnant people want to be involved in clinical trials. Let's make it easy and accessible for them to participate. And then let's empower them with their own data, right? Had Lakethia had a Power Mom platform at the palm of her hands, she could show her providers, look, these, I have the data in my hands. These are the outcomes that I've had. Please listen to me. And I can show you what's happened, right? While contributing to data, while contributing to research, she can own her data and help engage with the clinicians to impact her care, right? It's kind of like an all-in-one. As we learn from her, she gets the benefit from that work that she's contributing at the same time. So we get to empower and engage at the same time with the Power Mom Research Platform. We know that this works with the pilot study that Jennifer did back in 2017. We gathered so many data points. We were able to engage those in rural zip codes, right? Those, again, in the outskirts who don't have ready access to large academic centers to participate in the brick and mortar research institutions, those who are non-white, those who are, again, that high mortality, those 40 and over, able to capture them on this research app that we embedded with WebMD. With our pilot study, and WebMD is still one of our Power Mom Consortium partners right now. And we actively engage them in 60 days. So 60 days of their pregnancy journey gives us so much more information that currently exists in the literature and currently exists that more that doesn't exist for the participant. Again, making it about them and how we help them out. So when we break down barriers to participants, right, and we build trust with them, knowing that we're partnering with them to create a platform that engages them, that provides them information that they would find useful, right? We break down that power structure. So it's not us sitting in our academic center, making them come to us, but bringing the research to them, right? Making it so that it's mutual beneficial, learning from them, what's working with this platform, what's not working, and sharing the knowledge, not having them wait for some peer-reviewed journal, but as we get this data out there, how do we make it digestible and giving it back to them so they can also learn how the data that they're sharing with us is impacting or hopefully changing maternal health care. And of course, I cannot talk about trust and community-based research and data security without talking about the impact that Dobbs decision has had on pregnant people and really, excuse me, people engaging with fertility tracking apps or fertility security and cybersecurity in general. And I wanted to put this on there to say that on Power Mom, we take, well, really at any of the platforms with the DTC, we take data security extremely, excuse me, seriously, right? So no identifiable information is shared with any researchers. No names, nothing like that is shared. It's a HIPAA compliant. There's so many words that goes into the details of how much we take data security very seriously. But the impact in knowing how their health information can be used against them is something that we take seriously, and we're aware of that and how that can impact enrollment and engagement. And so we work with our participants to make sure that they're that we can address their fears the best that we can, and that we are aware of this and that we take this very seriously. So I've talked a lot about the platform. I wanted just a quick demo video so you can see what it looks like in the smart form and in the smart view before I show you kind of what questions we're asking and how we integrate different platforms into it. So they go through a quick screening questionnaire. So it's those who are 16 or older who are eligible. Those who are currently any time in their pregnancy or up to 8 weeks postpartum, because we do want to capture that postpartum population as well. They have the ability to skip some of the questions if they don't know the answers. They can come back to it later. We get some basic, excuse me, basic demographic information that they can enter. Again, we try to make this very pithy, very easy, very simple to use. I'm going to pause here. You see that we ask for zip code data. when we talk about addressing, again, healthcare desert, trying to make an impact on maternal fetal health care, because again, we're collecting this data, we're doing this research to translate to the bedside. So understanding where resources can be put forward, where more help is needed, that's why we collect that zip code data as we map kind of what our results look like. It's helpful to kind of find out, okay, where needs the most, what areas need the most help. That's where this data, zip code data, comes from, and why we collect that. Height and weight at the start of their pregnancy. And so once they fill out this initial screening questionnaire, they can get a more personalized dashboard. So we're not trying to compete with all the fancy pregnancy tracking apps that I know I used when I was pregnant, but just something to make it, again, more fun for them to come back to the app. So they get a nice personalized view where they are in their pregnancy, where their due date is, and they can update their pregnancy status. Maybe they get an updated due date from their clinician when they go see their provider, or maybe their pregnancy ended, right? So they can update their pregnancy status however they want, whenever they want. And then they have this, whatever tasks they have remaining, so whatever survey we would like them to have is right there in their front page, and they can access that whenever they want. We do also give them the option to share their digital health data with us. So if they have a, they want to connect their Apple Health Kit or their Google Fit data with us, we give them the opportunity to do that, as well as the electronic health records, and they can choose what electronic health records they do. Going to pause here really quickly. As I said, while they're on this platform contributing to data or contributing to science, they can also have some resources. So providing them articles about pregnancy, postpartum, lactation, breastfeeding. We rely on our participant advisory board to know what resources is helpful to our participants. And for example, one very helpful feedback that we got was that, articles are great. I don't want to read articles. If I need help, for example, mental health resources, I want to be able to click on a button and know, like, how do I access a helpline or something like that? So that's something that we changed and integrated based on the feedback that we got from our participants. So making it, again, a research platform, but also something that helps our participants as well. They can withdraw from the study at any time. And I think that just shows more how they can connect to the app. And so we have a rotating kind of a featured article of the month based on interesting. So like, for example, COVID, or if there's a public health crisis, kind of how does that impact pregnancy? What do we know? Something that's cutting edge that, again, brings them back to using our research platform. So what exactly are we asking from these recurring surveys? What tasks are we asking of them? You saw the short intake survey. We also ask a health history. So mom's pregnancy history, the baby's biological second parent's health history, and what medications are they taking. This is huge because, again, clinical trials, drug trials don't typically include pregnant women, but pregnant women take lots of medications. And so collecting that information in a non-obtrusive way is helpful to know what those medications are, and then what health outcomes come from it. Every 2 weeks, we ask them medications, vaccinations, what symptoms are they having, and they enter their pulse, blood pressure, and weight. These are things that they can then visualize as a nice give back to them throughout their pregnancy journey. Every 2 months or so, we ask them who's supporting them during their pregnancy and after the baby is born. What plans do they have to feed the baby, contraceptive plans, and then the health outcomes. So pregnancy outcomes, how do they give birth? What happened to the baby? Are they seeing their clinician? What clinician are they seeing? Are they seeing a doctor, midwife? And then postpartum, mood, health, things like that. So that's what we ask in the survey. I'm going to give a caveat to the next 3 slides that I'm going to show. The next 3 slides are slides that if a intern, medical student, resident, or anyone that I'm mentoring ever had these slides in a presentation, I would skewer them because I don't ever want to see busy slides. I'm doing this to exemplify a point of the depth of questions that we ask in a fun, branching logic way. So apologize for the busyness, but there's a point to it. These are the depths of questions that we ask on the platform, but we do it in a branching logic. So not every participant sees the questions, but it depends on how they answer yes or no. So it's not burdensome for them, and actually they're able to go through it pretty quickly. Highlight, for example, things that we can get from our participants. What method of transportation are they using to get to their healthcare? Think back to that zip code and demographic questionnaire that we asked them. How did they get pregnant? Are they currently being treated for anxiety or depression? How does this question change when we think about kind of the environment that we're in right now? What conditions were they diagnosed with, et cetera? So these are some of the basic health history questions we get from them and about the baby's biological second parent. Then recurrent surveys, these are the questions that we ask either every 2 weeks or every 2 months. Nausea and vomiting, basic symptoms. We had a participant reach out and actually tell us that the fact that they were using this research platform and checking in with their body and actually answering our questions every 2 weeks about nausea, pain, helped them engage with their healthcare provider sooner and got help sooner because they were checking in with their body in a way more sooner that they're seeing their OB per the standard clinical guidelines. So even the simple act of checking in with your body in a way that, oh, like, actually, I think I'm having more symptoms regularly, help them get help sooner than they would have otherwise. So sometimes our observational study may impact care, but that's stuff that we connect. Again, the changes in medications. And then what kind of birth control? How does the type of birth control you plan on using change throughout the course of your pregnancy? And then that support question. And how does your support change based on kind of who you are, where you're living, and what outcomes we have? So kind of painting that picture of how these questions and layering the results that we get, kind of imagine a map of the United States. As we get these results and the picture that we truly get that pregnancy journey and learn more as we get orders of magnitude, tens of thousands using this PowerMom platform. Take a moment to see how much we can truly learn about pregnancy for the individual and how we can really impact the healthcare crisis that we have and learn what we can do to make it better with these questions. I haven't even talked about the third-party integrations that we have, the data points that we can connect passively, right? How does activity, heart rate variability, how can we create algorithms to really predict who's more likely to get preeclampsia, pregnant-induced hypertension? How can we gather this, use artificial intelligence to then create predictive algorithms to identify who's more likely to get this and help our OBs, our midwives, or nurse practitioners screen for these patients sooner and help improve these outcomes. So really, by collecting this data, we're broadening the research landscape. We have this lightweight foundational approach that has these survey questions, that has this passive data collection that we can have, right, with the wireless wearable technology with our survey questions that gives us this long observational study. But then we can dig deeper into it, right? We can have funded subsidies. PowerMom First is one subsidy that can really allow us to ask more questions to look at the impact of structural racism on some of the healthcare outcomes that we see. We're working with one of our partners to find out an intervention that can impact and hopefully improve postpartum depression. How can we use certain in-home tools to gather more information to create that predictive algorithms to really find out who's going to be more likely to have disorders of pregnant-induced hypertension, right? How can we then use this information that we're collecting to dig deeper to then find out intervention studies? How can we use this data to work with healthcare plans, those who make policies to impact how we actually provide the care and start moving that needle and make the changes that we need to see? That's the cutting edge work that we're doing here at Scripps Research. When we create a platform that really engages those at the margins, right? That engages those marginalized populations, you create a research platform that captures everyone, that captures all that data, that captures everyone, and you create a system that includes all the voices needed to make the difference and impact healthcare. And that's the work that we're doing here, and it's exciting. How do the participants benefit? Well, We have a key set of participants who will help us design the platform to help us revisit it, make sure it's doing what it needs to engage and recruit our participants. They get to see their data doing data visualization. We talked about in-app resources. There are select participants who, if they want, get Fitbit devices. Those who are part of some subsidies get gift cards. Hopefully, when we have enough participants, get the digital twin. And then I put the OV advisory board because, as a reminder, to always showcase that I am not a OBGYN. I'm not a maternal fetal health specialist, but I am privileged to work with those who are from Scripps Health, from UNC, from Loma Linda, who advise the work that we're doing at Paramount to make sure that we have that clinical approach and that clinical expertise to make sure that we're working and doing the best that we can for the participants, and the results and the questions we're asking are clinically relevant as well. So with the time that I have, a quick snapshot into our current data and the promise what we have, right? Even so, the participants who say that they're changing their medications, and I will say, this is a little taken out of context because we had participants who are using the Paramount platform who have not seen a healthcare provider yet and are taking or changing their medications. These participants get a branch in logic that give us more information about why they changed their medication, what medications they changed. I don't know if it's the fact that it's an app, but they're honest about what other things you're taking, whether it's marijuana, vaping, tobacco, and illicit substances, and how would this change as we see mental health increase, the mental health increase, crisis increase in maternal fetal health and maternal health. I wanted to show this data really quickly, just juxtaposed with the huge mortality that I showed in those who are over the age of 40. So to kind of orient, those who are younger than 35 are the blue line. Those who are greater than 35 are the green line. Now, as someone who had both her children at the age of 35, when I felt like I was more established with my career, marriage, had more support, I was actually a little bit surprised to see that those who were older than 35 in our platform had less support from their partners, their spouses, their family, their friends. And we may wonder how much this impacts those high mortality numbers we see in those older than the age of 40. As we layer these results with some of the other results that we're seeing, what picture, what question that really answers as we see more of this data and we analyze more of this data. This is just, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly so we have time for questions, but racial differences. So this is white versus non-white in the type of birth control that our participants are using. And this right here to show kind of how people plan to breastfeed their babies. And we still see disparities in white versus non-white, those who feel comfortable breastfeeding, still breast milk by bottle versus actually nursing their babies. And we see the differences in those who are older than 35 versus those who are younger than 35. So just a snapshot and some of the data that we've seen so far as we started to analyze our first cohort of participants that we have. So I wanted to showcase some of our partners that we have in our Paramount Consortium. These are organizations, national, local, community organizations who are passionate and strong advocates on maternal health and wanting to make a difference in this arena. And again, I want to say that it truly takes a village, right? It's working with clinicians, tech companies, different organizations who want to impact this field to bring them to the Paramount platform, whether it's in-kind donations, money donations, to bring more awareness of the Paramount platform, because as we get more orders of tens and thousands using these platforms, the questions that we can answer, the stories that we can tell, and truly making a difference in this crisis is going to be astounding. And these are some of the partners that we have that are showcasing this work. Paramount takes an incredible team. These are some of the faces behind the Paramount team, and I should have put the participant advisory board together, but I did not get their permissions to show their pictures or their names on here. So I will get that if I'm invited for another front row series to show kind of what our results are. More of the team at the Digital Trial Center. And thank you to them. And I'll turn it over to Jamie for questions and discussions.
Thanks, Lachey. That was terrific. I think maybe I missed it, but I didn't get a sense for how many participants you have. What's the size of that?
So right now, as we transitioned off the old platforms, we relaunched in 2021. We have over 500 participants right now.
Okay, all right. And do you have a target that you're, obviously the more data, the better for everybody? And what limits your ability to enroll?
So two-part question. The goal that we have, honestly, is 1 million participants actively using the platform. So we're very far behind. So we want more participants being aware and using it. We'll start with 10,000 participants, but we'll to do some of the more predictive algorithms that we want to see, and we'll start doing that digital twin work we want to do. But really, 1 million is the goal on the platform. And then the limitation, honestly, is awareness. That's why it takes working with those named partners to bring awareness to the partners, or to bring awareness of the platform, and working with our participants about how useful as a tool and as a platform to really engage in this research.
I think a couple people have asked how can people be directed to the platform to participate?
That is a rookie mistake on my end. And I hope that one of my team members, because that should have been one of the first things I put on the slide, was a link to that. I'm going to blame my team who read my slide and did not let me put that on there. So if one of my team is on here, I will put that in the chat really quickly to add that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get that information. That's a good way to get enrollment.
Yes.
So, I think there's a couple things about security that come up. So you mentioned that you were upping security, but what is it? Is there anything new from the pressure? One of our audience members asked about the impact of Dobbs overturning Roe v. Wade, and does that present specific challenges? And then what were you able to do to, up the security of your personal information?
So the first part of the question is, what did that do? It made people petrified, right? People aren't going to want to share their health data, and that's what we're asking them to do. So it made them a little bit more nervous about that. And so we have to show that that their data is safe with us, that we're not going to, that we're not selling their data, that we're not using their data for nefarious reasons, and that their data is de-identified. And so what they share with us is not being, thanks everybody, that their data is not being, will not be linked to them. So remove all identifiable information. And I have, it's a lot and it's chunky for me to read, but we have a lot of information to keep their data safe. So data secured and stored in HIPAA compliant, meaningful use, certified EDC, HIE bus, there's a lot of jargon that we use, that we upped our security, but know that it's there. And I'm happy if somebody wants to reach out to me, I can put my email and I can actually send what we do to make sure that we take data privacy very seriously.
So maybe dovetailing off that a little bit, there must be some liabilities associated with this. So it's not so much that you're collecting information, but at some level you're trying to provide direction to underserved communities, or is that not the intent?
That's not the intent.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's definitely not intent. We're providing it is still a research platform, but it's a research platform that lets you see what you're sharing, right? So if you think about traditional research platforms, you go in, you give data, you leave. Right, this you get to choose kind of what you share, and you get to see what you're sharing. So when we talk about data visualization, if you're entering your blood pressure and you're seeing that your blood pressure is falling outside your parameter, you have a way of actually seeing what your data looks like in a way that, okay, wow, this is actually higher than what it needs to be, and it's staying there. You have an avenue that allows you to interface with your healthcare provider sooner. So you have a tool that allows you to provide with your healthcare provider sooner. We don't provide guidance. We're still a research platform,
Right.
not a health advisory. We have resources on there that are vetted. So it's not guidance,
Right.
providing
So,
information.
But what would it take to go to the next level of actually doing that? And how far off is that? Right.
That is a good question. I don't know that I have the answer to that.
Sure.
I think it would have to be more, it'd be transitioning to a healthcare app or health advisory. And we've talked about that, right? So some of our partners, like we talked about, we have some of our partners that are, have doula organizations. And we want to have that community of support. So we even talked about having a chat function or having a ask a doula for support. How do we have that function on the research platform? That still doesn't make us liable, and we haven't figured that out, but I think that's the next step that we want to do.
Yeah.
That's, I think, what our participants are asking for, right? So like, as you coming up with these things and you have questions, what's the best way to get that advice? And I think we've got participants, we've got our partners, we've got, midwives and doulas who are these patient support networks. How do we bring those two communities together in a safe way? It's something we haven't figured out, but I think that's probably the next step.
And so one of the things that'll make for good data is to have people engaged throughout their pregnancy and beyond. And so how is that going? How are you doing? And what have you learned about how to keep people engaged?
That is actually something we're doing pretty good at. So as I said, our goal is really to engage them within their first trimester. Right now, we're capturing the majority of people towards the end of their first trimester. So early second trimester, first trimester is when we're engaging them. And then what we're seeing is like, so how do we capture like how often how we're keeping them is how many who are eligible then have filled out our delivery survey. And right now we're at about 50%, which I think is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with that. And then somebody asked in the chat, the informed consent, it doesn't include informed consent, and that's all done through the platform itself.
Right. Yeah. So if anyone's wondering, there's quite a few. I posted in the chat both the Power Mom and the digital trials URLs that were supplied. My understanding is that people are free to distribute this and have people enroll in the platform. Is that right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, so maybe what other ways could you promote this?
So the best way is working, actually there's so many different ways, right? I think it's working with direct to participant research. That's what we're focusing on. Where are the participants getting their information? It has to be multimodal. So working with trusted brand names. One of the things that we saw was most successful was Philips and WebMD. So WebMD had a pregnancy app that they were promoting. We were embedded directly in that pregnancy app, and that got us lots of participants in our pilot study. Philips and their pregnancy app did a campaign, a 2-week campaign, and that skyrocketed our enrollment. If you're working directly with, for example, March of Dimes, we're going to where the participants are and advertising and promoting this research platform where they are is the best. Working with our clinical partners to have Paramount just be in the doctor's office with our community advocacy groups, that's the best way. So it's really a multi-pronged approach to engage in research, but it takes a way to outreach and meet the participants where they are. And once we meet them, they stay with us.
So there's clearly an intersection of the data that you're collecting with other clinical areas. So, is there a way for you to collaborate or share information with other clinicians?
Thank you for asking that. So I mentioned very briefly the OB Advisory Council and some of the partnership that we have with Scripps Health and an OBGYN at UNC. So we have partnered with them in different grant applications for different sub-studies using the Paramount platform. If a clinician wants to access the data to ask a particular question, they come in as a partner, sign data use agreements, and then we work together because, again, we're collecting this data to make a difference. We want to work with other researchers to use this data to kind of spread the word. So that is the point.
Okay, terrific. I think we're coming up on the hour, and I want to be mindful. There's a lot of questions that we didn't get to, and I think some of them are more appropriate for Lachey to answer offline. So we have the transcript of the chat, and we will provide that to her, and hopefully some of these can get answered. This has been recorded, so you can find this on YouTube at the Front Row website. And the next Front Row is Katya Lamia, who's going to talk about circadian rhythms, our biological clocks, and that's Wednesday, October 19th. So thanks, Lachey. That was terrific. You're doing great work. And we will see you all at the next Front Row.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.